How did a simple cup of coffee help change the world of art? Can a public space like a cafe really shape a cultural revolution? The rise of cafe culture in Paris. The rise of cafe culture in Paris began in the 1700s. Paris grew rapidly in the early 1700s and became Europe's intellectual and cultural hub. Cafes had played a crucial role in this transformation, providing spaces for the exchange of ideas. The first cafes appeared in Paris in the 17th century, and by the 18th century, they were central to Parisian social life. Growth and expansion. In 1720, there were about 280 cafes in Paris, and by 1790, the number soared to at least 1,800. After the French Revolution in 1789, cafes spread to more modest areas, attracting working-class people. These new cafes became places where people socialized, often over coffee, tobacco, and gambling, with some people seated outside on the sidewalks. Cafes and the Enlightenment. The Age of Enlightenment brought new ideas and perspective, and cafes became the key places for philosophical and intellectual discussions. This period saw the rise of the salon tradition, where artists, intellectuals, and revolutionaries gathered to debate politics, art, and society. As society became democratic, these discussions moved to elite salons to the public spaces of cafe. And this allowed a wider range of people to engage in the exchange of ideas. The social significance of cafe culture to Paris. Cafes in Paris had allowed artists to create a broader, more diverse audience rather than just the elite. Artists and intellectuals could engage with the general public and examine everyday life in cafes. Intellectuals often use cafes to observe working-class people and their social interactions. The cafe became a backdrop for studying modern life, and this offered a window into the lives of people from different social circles. Paris's new image. Baron Haussmann's redesign of Paris. Baron Haussmann's redesign of Paris introduced wide boulevards and straighter streets, providing an ideal location for tables and chairs to be placed outside. As a result, outdoor seating offered even more chance to sit and observe life as it passed by. In Chapter 5, The Open City, the Boulevards, Parks, and Streets of Paris of How Paris Became Paris by Joan de Jean, the author covers ideas of Baron Haussmann's redesign of Paris that ultimately allowed social life to flourish and began the step to modernization. A quote from the novel of page 76 states, by 1645, 3 visionary urban works, the Pont Neuf, the Place Royale, and the Ile Notre Dame, had become the foundation for Paris's new image as a city remarkable not only for its size, but for its exciting and innovative constructions. Urban developments and Paris's new image. These projects were part of making Paris not only larger but more innovative, helping to establish it as a modern city. Haussmann's redesign built on this, making Paris a city that celebrated social interaction and modernization. This impacted cafe culture, and these redesigns led to creations like cafes, ultimately. Gender roles in early cafe culture. Paris cafes were not just for the elite, they were also gendered spaces with strong masculine presences. Historian Jonathan Morris notes that not many women would frequent cafes, as they fear they would be mistaken for prostitutes. During the French Revolution, 1789, women were largely confined to the private sphere, with domestic duties and family obligations that limited their public involvement. Public life, including cafe culture, was primarily a male-dominated domain. Cafes as cultural and intellectual hubs. Cafes were more than just places to drink coffee. They were vibrant spaces for artists, writers, and philosophers, and intellectuals to gather. They provided a unique environment where people from multiple different social classes could interact and break down traditional social barriers that existed before. Cafes appeared in multiple cities like Venice, Paris, Vienna, and London, offering spaces for open intellectual discussions. Coffee is a very important factor to their cultural being. And unlike bars, cafes were ideal for exchanging ideas and fostering social interaction in a more intellectual setting. These cafes became central to the spread of Enlightenment thought, where philosophers like Voltaire, Rousseau, and Diderot debated politics, science, and philosophy. How cafes became places for revolutionary and artistic ideas. Cafes as centers for artistic ideas. Cafes in Paris were key hubs for artistic movements like Romanticism and Impressionism, attracting writers, poets, and artists. Spaces such as Café de Flore became popular with intellectuals and future surrealists, helping to nurture avant-garde ideas. These cafes were essential in spreading new, revolutionary, and artistic movements. As you can see on the slide, we have Café de Flore and Café Procope, which is the oldest cafe in Paris. Cafes and revolutionary movements. During the French Revolution, cafes like Café Procope became centers for radical political discussion. These cafes helped popularize revolutionary ideas such as liberty, equality, and fraternity. Many historical records of Paris cafes were lost or destroyed by the National Archives due to fears that they were meeting points for revolutionaries. Some key cafes in Paris include Café Procope, which was created in 1686 and is the oldest cafe in Paris. As you can see on the slide, you can see the interior and what it looks like. This was modeled after Middle Eastern and Western Asian coffee houses, and they introduced coffee to Paris. Elite clientele included several significant philosophers, and this made it a center for intellectual discussions. They're known for their modern mirrors and marble tables, and this cafe set the standard for all future Parisian cafes. The next cafe was Café de la Régence, and you can see chess players at this cafe in the second photo on the slide. This cafe is located near the Louvre, and it became a famous intellectual and revolutionary gathering spot. It's known for hosting chess enthusiasts and inherited Café Procope's chess clientele around 1740. This was called the best place in Paris for chess, with many professional players working and visiting the cafe. The final cafe is Café de Flore, which was created in 1887. This was one of Paris's most legendary cafes, which was popular with writers and philosophers, including Georges Bataille and Pablo Picasso. This remains a key cultural and intellectual hub in modern-day Paris where many tourists go to visit. Impacts on art. Impact of cafe culture on modern art. Cafes played a key role in the development of modern art, providing a space for well-known artists like Monet, Picasso, and Man Ray, and many more to gather, socialize, and exchange ideas. As you can see on the slide, we have some of Monet's art, Man Ray's art, and Picasso. All of these are extremely important figures to the art industry, and they often frequented at cafes among Paris. Cafe culture impacted Impressionism, Realism, and Romanticism, and these are all art forms that emerged during the 1800s. The informal social atmosphere of cafes allowed artists to break away from traditional academic art practices and experiment with new techniques and forms. Cafe culture encouraged the rise of modernism as well, where artists were exposed to different perspectives on the human experience, inspiring fresh ideas into their work. In the 19th century, cafes became an important part of the lives of Impressionist artists, serving as spaces for professional and social interaction. Some key artists and intellectuals who frequented Parisian cafes in this photo include Man Ray, Picasso, Scott Fitzgerald, Gertrude Stein, Hemingway, and multiple other countless artists have frequented the Parisian cafes and impacted Parisian culture. Modern-day cafe culture in Paris. Paris cafes continue to be very iconic symbols of the city's vibrant culture and intellectual life overall. While still popular among tourists, they remain central to social life, serving as meeting points for Parisians of all backgrounds. Cafes maintain their role as spaces for casual conversation, artistic inspiration, and political debate. In the 21st century, cafes also served as creative hubs for the contemporary artists, writers, and musicians, continuing the tradition of fostering avant-garde ideas. The cafe remains a place where people gather to discuss ideas, share experiences, and reflect on modern life. With the rise of digital technology in today's modern world, some cafes have adapted to offering free Wi-Fi, becoming a popular spot for remote workers.